My name's Roberta, and my perfect sister Serena didn't just demand my inheritance at our family dinner, she plotted to steal it, with our parents' blessing, while they served me a napkin with my name misspelled. They thought I'd stay silent, but I'm about to expose their betrayal and burn their fairy tale to the ground. Before we dive in, what time are you listening and where from? Story might feel too familiar. The rain had been tapping the windows since morning, that kind of soft, persistent drizzle that made Savannah feel smaller than it already was. I'd just finished editing a research paper when my phone buzzed. A family group text. Those were never good news. Alice, just a small celebratory dinner this Saturday for Serena and Barrett. Hope you can make it, honey. Another stage for Serena to shine while I'm pushed to the shadows, I thought, my stomach tightening. No punctuation, just sweet enough to feel like an obligation. I stared at the message for a while. Celebratory, she said for Serena, my older sister, and Barrett, her shiny new fiancé. I hadn't seen them since they got engaged 3 months ago. Serena had posted a picture of the ring on Instagram with the caption, "Said yes to my forever." The ring was massive, of course, the kind of stone you show off in every photo, hand artfully placed next to coffee mugs and steering wheels. I replied with a simple, "Okay, what time?" The dinner was set at 7:00 p.m. sharp on Saturday. By the time I arrived, the sky was nearly dark, the clouds heavy with October. I parked 2 blocks away from my parents' house. Their driveway was already full, of course. I walked in, damp hair sticking to my collar, and was greeted by warmth and the scent of rosemary chicken. My mother, Alice, air-kissed both sides of my face, her hands cool and soft. "You look cozy," she said, eyes grazing the sleeves of my thrifted knit sweater. "Cozy? You mean invisible," I thought, forcing a smile. Serena was glowing. She always glowed. Tall, golden hair, teeth perfect, like she practiced smiling in mirrors. She gave me a hug that was more posed than embrace. Barrett nodded at me, polite. "Roberta, you act like I'm a stranger, Serena," I thought, my heart sinking. First started with small talk, the kind that never really lands anywhere, weather, housing prices, a friend's divorce, no one was shocked about. I mostly listened. That's what I usually do. I noticed my place setting halfway through the first course. Linen napkin, embroidered name, except it wasn't quite right. Roberta 1N like I was a misprint at my own table. I held the napkin gently, thumb tracing the misplaced stitch. "You couldn't even get my name right, could you?" I thought, my anger simmering. I didn't say anything right away. I told myself maybe it was a mistake. Maybe they just didn't notice. Dessert came. A lemon tart with too much sugar, just how Serena liked it. That's when Barrett leaned back, sipped his wine, and said casually, "So, I heard your grandfather set up a trust for you." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "The trust," Serena chimed in, her tone sugar smooth. "The one you'll get when you're 40? You know, it could really help take the engagement party up a notch. I mean, the guest list's getting a little out of hand." She laughed like we were sharing a joke. "You're after my future, Serena, and you think I'll just hand it over?" I thought, my pulse racing. I glanced around. My father, Michael, was cutting into his tart like nothing was happening. Alice took a long sip of wine before adding, "It's not unreasonable to think about sharing legacy money. It's all family, right?" My fork clinked against my plate. "I'm not even 40 yet," I said, keeping my voice steady. "The trust is legally restricted until then. It's not something I can touch." Serena leaned forward, eyes wide with innocence. "But if you could, wouldn't you want to support something that brings us all together?" Barrett added. "You're not even using it right now." "Using it? It's my lifeline, not your party fund," I thought, my jaw tightening. That word stuck in my throat. Using like money should never sit still, like I was hoarding it instead of waiting for the moment it mattered. I unfolded the napkin and held it up slightly. "By the way," I said, "you misspelled my name." Her mug tilted her head. "Did we?" "It's just a napkin," Alice said, brushing it off with a wave of her hand. "You're being dramatic. You're rewriting my existence and I'm the problem," I said, my voice sharp but controlled. "Dramatic?" The word echoed in my skull like a warning. I folded the napkin carefully, pressed it into my lap. The conversation moved on without me. They talked about potential venues, about Serena's dress designer, about signature cocktails with custom ice cubes shaped like hearts. I stayed quiet. At the end of the night, Serena hugged me again, tighter this time. No hard feelings, okay? No hard feelings? You're stealing from me and you expect gratitude, I thought, my smile forced. I nodded, but I didn't mean it. On the drive home, the rain got heavier. Headlights blurred across the windshield and my thoughts blurred with them. Was I being cold, too logical? Or had I just become the person they expected me to be? Unemotional, distant, useful in emergencies but never for joy. I parked outside my apartment and sat there for a while. The heater clicked as it cooled. The silence felt heavier than the rain. In the passenger seat, my purse sat open. I reached inside and pulled out the napkin. Roberta. I held it between my fingers like evidence. Not just of a mistake, but a message, subtle, etched into linen. I folded the napkin into a perfect square, tucked it into my coat pocket, and told myself I was being too sensitive. But by the time the next invitation arrived, I knew I hadn't imagined it. It came in the form of a voicemail from Serena, her voice cheerful and brittle. Hey, Bert, brunch this Saturday with Barrett's parents. Very casual, nothing fancy, just family. Hope you can come. Just family. Then why do I feel like an outsider? I thought, my heart heavy. She always said my name like it was a stage cue. Bert, like a sound to keep the room moving. I replied with a short yes, and showed up at the coastal restaurant outside of town where her future in-laws were hosting. It was the kind of place with stone fireplaces and waiters who knew which water glass to refill without being asked. Everyone was dressed like they were attending a lifestyle magazine shoot. Light blues, cream sweaters, polished boots. I wore black again. I wasn't trying to make a statement, it just felt like armor. The brunch moved along in a blur of mimosas and small talk. Her mother-in-law-to-be complimented Serena's posture. Who even does that? And Barrett's dad retold a tennis story like we were all waiting for the twist. No one asked me a thing. Not about work, not about my life. I could have been a coat hanging off the back of a chair and they wouldn't have noticed. Still, I smiled politely, took sips of coffee, nodded at the right moments. We took a group photo outside the restaurant before leaving. It was chilly enough that Serena leaned into Barrett and wrapped her beige coat tightly around her. Someone said, "Say engagement," and the shutter clicked. That evening I got a ping on my phone. Serena just posted a photo. I opened the app and there it was. Everyone in the picture tagged and glowing except me. I refreshed the screen once, twice, still not there. A few minutes later, a message popped up from someone I hadn't talked to in weeks. Their old high school classmate named Tina. Tina? Weird that you weren't there. Looks like the whole family showed up. I stared at her message, my jaw clenched slowly. I was in the photo. I was in the damn photo. But she'd tagged everyone except me. You erased me, Serena, but I see you clearly now, I thought, my anger boiling over. Just enough to write me out of the narrative without making a scene. That was twist 3. Not explosive, not loud, but so sharp I could barely breathe. 4 days later, I drove over to my parents' place. It was late afternoon and the sky was darkening fast. Their porch light flicked on automatically as I walked up the steps. Inside, the house smelled like pot roast and pine-scented surface cleaner. My dad, Michael, was in his recliner watching a college football game. My mom, Alice, was at the dining table flipping through a catalog with a pen in her hand. They both looked up. "Hey, sweetheart," Alice said. "Want some dinner?" "I'm good. Just wanted to talk for a minute." I didn't sit. That made it easier to stay in control. I told them about the brunch, about how Serena had excluded me from the tag, how I'd gotten a message from someone thinking I wasn't there. Michael shifted in his seat, suddenly invested in his game again. Alice capped her pen slowly. "She probably just forgot," she said. "Forgot? Or did you help her erase me?" I said, my voice steady but piercing. Alice exhaled. "You've always been a little sensitive about these things." "No, I've been quiet. That's different." Michael finally looked up. "Why are you bringing this to us, Roberta?" "Because this isn't just about the brunch. This started with the trust fund conversation at dinner last week, remember? And now I'm being erased from public photos. What's next?" Alice closed the catalog. "Serena just wants to feel supported. She's under a lot of pressure right now." And I'm not, I asked. Being asked to hand over money I'm not legally allowed to access, being told I'm rigid, having my name embroidered wrong like I'm a mistake at my own family table, none of that's pressure. Michael didn't answer. Alice just said, maybe if you'd contributed a little something, she wouldn't feel like she had to act out. Contributed. You mean surrender my future to her greed? I said, my tone sharp with disbelief. It landed like a slap. They weren't just ignoring the behavior. They were excusing it, explaining away cruelty like it was a symptom of stress, a side effect of being the favorite. I nodded once, turned, and left. That night, I pulled out an old journal from under my bed. I hadn't written in it in over a month. The last entry was about a hiking trip I'd taken alone after a breakup. The ink had bled in places from a spilled water bottle. I flipped to a clean page and wrote at the top, "Is it really so bad if I give them a portion?" I stared at it. Would that stop all this? Would a few hundred be enough to buy my way back into the photo, into their good graces? Or would it just confirm what they already believed, that I was an account number, not a person? I closed the journal without writing anything else. Later that night, I curled up on the couch with a mug of chamomile tea, trying to quiet my thoughts. That's when the email came. Subject: You're invited, Serena and Barrett's engagement gala. I opened it, expecting more of the same, but this time it was bigger. A coastal venue in Tybee Island, formal attire, catering by a 5-star chef, string quartet. On the bottom, in pale gray font, gifts optional. Family expectations implied. I read it twice, then again. That word implied did more damage than a demand ever could. I stared at the invite, reread expectations implied, and realized they didn't ask for permission. They were announcing what was already decided. You expect me to fund your fantasy, Serena, without a word? I thought, my resolve hardening. I needed to see just how far they'd already written me out. The day of the engagement gala arrived with a thin curtain of rain misting over the hills outside Tybee Island. I'd left early. Not because I was eager, just unsure how long it would take to gather the nerve to walk in. The coastal venue's gravel lot was already lined with luxury cars when I arrived. A valet took my keys before I had the chance to reconsider. Inside, it was cinematic. Twinkle lights stretched from tree to tree like spider silk. A champagne tower stood 3 levels tall near a string quartet that hummed through a cover of Adele's Someone Like You. The scent of lavender floated in the air, anchored by the richness of roast duck being served in rounds on silver trays. At the entrance, a greeter handed me a small white card. "Please follow your seating label to sign." The words "Roberta Glenn Cousin" stared up at me from thick cardstock. I blinked once, twice, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks, but no. They hadn't just misspelled my name again. This time they'd reassigned my relationship entirely. I wasn't just Roberta Glenn, the youngest daughter of Alice and Michael. I was Roberta the cousin, like a distant accidental guest who happened to share some DNA in a calendar gap. "You've demoted me to a stranger, Serena," I thought, my heart pounding with betrayal. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "This should say Roberta Glenn. I'm not their cousin." The greeter looked down, smiled politely, and replied, "That's the name on the list, ma'am." No apology, no correction, just a smile like she'd been trained not to register discomfort. She gestured toward the far right section of the venue's patio, a cluster of tables slightly out of view, near where servers were entering and exiting with plates. I made my way there and sat down alone. From where I was placed, I could barely hear the speeches when they began, but I could see Serena wrapped in a fitted ivory dress, hair pulled into some complicated twist, smiling under a canopy of lights like she was being crowned queen of something sacred. Alice took the mic first. "I just want to say," she began, her voice already trembling with joy, "how proud we are of these two and Barrett. From the moment we met you, we knew you belonged," she went on, thanking people by name. "Aunt Margaret for the floral design, Uncle Wayne for helping set up the lighting, Mary and Ken for stepping in with support when we needed it," my name mentioned. Then Barrett leaned forward to add, "We're so grateful to our families, especially those who've supported us financially to make this day possible." There was a gentle murmur of agreement. Glasses clinked, and then just behind me, a woman in red turned to the woman next to her and whispered, "Must be the older sister." "So generous." I both nodded, eyes scanning the central tables where Serena's real family sat. "You gave her credit for my sacrifice, Barrett," I thought, my anger flaring. I didn't correct them. I didn't have the energy. All I could feel was the weight of that name card in my lap. Roberta. Glenn. Not even a typo this time. It was a decision. After the toasts, as the music picked up and guests drifted toward the dance area, I quietly slipped away, past the catering prep area, through an open hallway that led to what looked like a staff office. No one stopped me. No one noticed. Inside, a printed binder sat open on a table. I knew it was meant for vendor reference, guest lists, seating charts, dietary notes. I flipped through carefully. Then I saw it. A sheet labeled Vendor Deposit Summary, paid via Family Trust, Michael Glenn, refer, GTF 83. At the bottom, a line marked Funding Source listed a family account tied to a restricted trust code. My trust code. It didn't have my name on it, but I'd seen that code before on bank documents, on email footers. When I'd met with the trust advisor, my stomach turned slowly like molasses pulling itself down a cold glass. I snapped a photo. Just as I was about to leave, I noticed something else submitted by M. Glenn, my father. He didn't ask me. No one had. And yet somehow, a trust fund I wasn't supposed to touch until 40 had made its way into the venue's deposit records. "You used my trust without my consent, Dad," I thought, my hands trembling with rage. I stepped out into the dark, the sounds of laughter still echoing down the gravel path. My heels crunched softly as I made my way back to my car. I didn't drive off immediately. I just sat there, hands gripping the wheel without motion, staring at nothing. Then I reached over to the passenger seat, opened my coat pocket and pulled out the napkin, the same one from the dinner. Still misspelled, still folded, carefully. I smoothed it out on my lap, then folded it again. Slow, precise, deliberate. I reached for the glove compartment, placed it inside and thickly shut. It wasn't just a keepsake anymore. It was a record of what they saw when they looked at me. Not a daughter, not a sister, just someone disposable enough to rename and repurpose when convenient. That's when I stopped hoping they'd see me differently. I wasn't being excluded anymore. I was being overwritten. The next morning, I got up before the sun did. I hadn't slept much anyway. While the kettle murmured behind me in the kitchen, I logged into the bank's secure portal and stared at the blinking cursor, hesitating only once before typing in the access code to the trust. I told myself this was about clarity, not suspicion. But that wasn't the truth. Not anymore. The ledger loaded slowly. I watched the bar crawl across the screen like it knew what it was about to reveal. 3 access logs stood out right away, one pinged from my own login, expected. The second, an IP address I recognized immediately. My father's study, his firm's business network. The timestamp matched a day Serena had posted a photo of her dress fitting, smiling like royalty. The third was what made me sit back in my chair. An authorization request submitted 3 days before the venue gala. A request to release $50,000, 0 cents. Status denied. Filed by Roberta Glenn, except I hadn't filed it. Attached was a scanned form with my name in the signature box, only it wasn't my signature. It looked like someone had tried to mimic it. Slanted letters, slight tremble. Almost right, but too clean, too careful. No one's real signature is that practiced. You forged my name, Serena, thinking I'd never notice, I thought, my blood boiling. My chest tightened. I leaned closer to the screen, rereading it like somehow that would change what it meant. Whoever did this thought I wouldn't look, or worse, they assumed I'd see it and still stay silent. I spent the next hour downloading every log I could access, printing everything. Then, after showering, I drove to my parents' house. It was mid-afternoon by the time I pulled into the driveway. The maple tree in their front yard had turned gold overnight. Funny how things rot while still looking beautiful. Mom answered the door. She looked surprised but not displeased. "Oh," she said, stepping back. "Didn't expect you." "Everything okay, I just wanted to drop something off," I replied, lifting the envelope I had in hand. It was empty. I hadn't decided yet if I'd use it for anything. She stepped aside and let me in. The house smelled like clove and pine-scented floor polish. Classical music floated faintly from the Bluetooth speaker in the living room. "Coffee?" she asked. I nodded. "Thanks." Dad appeared from his office down the hall, all smiles. "Well, look who's here." He hugged me longer than usual. His cologne smelled like citrus and sandalwood, sharp enough to make my eyes sting. We sat in the kitchen, the three of us. No one mentioned the gala. I waited until the silence started to curdle before I spoke. "I've been going through some trust documentation," I said carefully. Dad's coffee cup paused mid-air. "That's so." Mom gave him a brief glance before looking back at me. "Why would you dig all that up now, sweetheart?" "There was some unusual activity," I continued, my tone as soft as I could manage. "Requests I didn't make. You know about the forgery, don't you, Dad?" I said, my eyes locked on his. He set the cup down harder than necessary. "We've all had a lot on our plates lately." I didn't respond. I just looked at him and waited. Mom sighed like I was making everything difficult again. "Serena's just been trying to bring everyone together," she offered, as if I'd questioned that. "She wants to feel supported. You've always been, well, more private." That word again, private. They'd used it since I was 13. When I didn't cry at Grandma Jane's funeral, when I preferred drawing to dance recital. "Did Serena need my trust to feel supported?" I asked, quiet but direct. "Or does she need it to fuel her lies?" I said, my voice cutting through the silence. Neither of them answered. "I'm not trying to create drama," I added, "but this isn't small." Dad shook his head slightly, like I was missing some bigger point. "You always make things heavier than they are." Some 15 minutes later, I was back in my car, envelope still in my coat pocket, fingers gripping the wheel tighter than they needed to. That evening, as I poured a glass of water in my kitchen, my phone buzzed. A message from Barrett. "Roberta, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Don't let some old man's rules ruin what could be a moment of unity." Attached was a PDF. I opened it. It was the original trust document. My grandfather's. Or at least it started that way. The scanned file had been annotated, highlighted in parts, some lines crossed out. The section on discretionary use in family interest circled in bold red. My stomach turned cold. He shouldn't have had this. "Barrett, follow up. Serena deserves this. You'll see, it's better if you stop resisting." "You're threatening me, Barrett, but I'm not backing down," I thought, my resolve unyielding. It was less a threat and more positioning, like he thought I could still be persuaded. I scrolled to the bottom of the file, just to be sure. The last page was unedited, thank God. There, under my grandfather's signature, was a note written in his small, slanted script. "Let this be used to build your future, not to pay for someone else's fantasy." I sat still for a long time. Let the words settle into the cracks of my bones. He'd written that for me. Not for Serena, not for some coastal circus. Me. I pulled the printed file from my desk drawer, set it beside the napkin I hadn't looked at since the party. Still creased, still spelling my name wrong. I didn't unfold it, just stared. And then I reached for the phone. Not to call Serena, not to call my parents. I dialed a number I hadn't used since the will had been read. A lawyer. The line rang 3 times before a woman picked up and said, "Office of Lindsay Bell, how may I direct your call?" I cleared my throat. "I need to schedule a consultation. It's about a family trust." As she placed me on hold, the classical music that played through the line matched the same piece I'd heard in my parents' kitchen. I almost laughed. Instead, I whispered to the napkin beside me. They weren't going to stop. I wasn't overreacting. I was right on time. But knowing the truth wasn't the hard part. It was what I had to do with it. The morning sun cut through the blinds like it had something to prove. I dressed without thinking. Jeans, sweater, no makeup, and drove straight to the law office of Lindsay Bell and Associates. I didn't stop for coffee. Didn't need it. My nerves were enough. Miss Bell greeted me herself. She looked exactly as I remembered. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, and a tone like she didn't waste time sugarcoating things. Her office was warm but clean. Mahogany desk, legal books, no family photos. I respected that. I slid the manila folder across the table. Access logs, forged request, a PDF from my brother-in-law, all of it. She flipped through, scanning quickly. Her eyes narrowed when she saw the signature page. "Roberta," she said flatly, "this isn't just unethical. It borders on fraud." I didn't speak. She looked up. "If this was submitted, even if it wasn't completed, it qualifies as criminal attempt under Georgia law. We're not talking about family drama anymore. This is legal territory." "They tried to rob me, Miss Bell, and I want conviction," I said, my voice steady with conviction. There was a weight in her words I couldn't ignore. She flipped back to the ledger printout. "You're not yet 40, which means your trust is still in protective status. But once it activates," she leaned back. "If they're already maneuvering this boldly now, what do you think happens then?" "That stuck. Not like a pin, like a hook." "They've already shown you they'll cross legal lines quietly," she continued. "Don't assume they'll stop when the stakes are higher." My jaw clenched. I nodded. She scribbled her number at the bottom of a business card and handed it to me. "Roberta, you need to consider proactive legal protection. Lock down your access, monitor for changes, and if anyone else tries something again, call me first." I thanked her. I meant it. Driving home, the road blurred a little. The morning traffic had picked up. Life went on around me like none of this had ever happened. Back inside my house, I closed the door quietly and stood in the entryway. I didn't cry right away, not even when I sank to the floor with my back to the wall, folder clutched in my hand. But when I opened my laptop, tried to write an email to my mother, and couldn't get past, "Hi, Mom," something inside cracked. I hit backspace, closed the window. I opened my journal instead, wrote, "Maybe I'm just overthinking," then crossed it out hard. It looked like someone had scratched through it with a knife. The memory came in like a flood. Serena was 14, I was 12. She'd made fun of my poem at Aunt Diana's Christmas party, said it was so serious for a little girl. Everyone laughed. I stood there red-faced, holding the paper like it was burning my fingers. Mom had pulled me aside and said, "Honey, don't make this a big deal. She's just trying to lighten the mood. You taught me to stay silent, Mom. But I'm done," I thought, the memory fueling my anger. That was the moment I learned silence was more comfortable for everyone else. That evening, just as I was trying to make peace with my thoughts, a delivery driver rang the bell. A slim white box sat on my doorstep. Return address, none, but the handwriting on the label, too tidy to be from a stranger. Inside was a framed photo. Serena and Barrett locked in a posed kiss under the venue lights, champagne in hand, everyone smiling in the background except me. I wasn't in the photo, but that wasn't the part that stung. Taped to the frame was a folded note. "Thought you might like a keepsake since you were part of the celebration. Mom." I turned the frame over, engraved in delicate cursive on the back, "With love from the family that came together." My hand shook. This wasn't kindness. This was a rewrite. This was them dressing theft in sentiment, making my exclusion look like affection, like I should be grateful. "You're gaslighting me, Mom, but I'm not falling for it," I thought, my fury rising. They were gaslighting me, turning memory into myth. And for the first time, I wasn't confused. I was furious. That night after dinner, I hadn't eaten much. I walked to the drawer where I kept the napkin from the first dinner, still folded neatly, still misspelled. I laid it beside the frame, the photo, the note. I stared at them both. "If I stay silent," I whispered, "I'm letting them teach the next girl in this family that this is okay," and that's when it changed. I opened my laptop, created a new folder. I labeled it The Record. Then I opened the cloud storage tab, uploaded the access logs, screenshots, Barrett's PDF, the scanned Gala invoice. I even included the email headers, each one labeled, dated, ordered. By the time I was done, it was nearly midnight, but I wasn't tired. I walked to the mirror over my desk and looked at myself. No tears, no shakiness, no questioning, just clarity. Not a woman unraveling, a woman preparing. They had their story. Now, I'd make sure mine was heard too. The first person I sent the files to wasn't my parents. It was the bank. Before sunrise, I sat in my kitchen with a mug of untouched coffee, uploading every document to the trust bank's secure portal. Screenshots, PDFs, ledger discrepancies, the photo of the caterer's invoice with my name left off, but my fund mentioned. I kept it clinical. Just facts, no emotion. I didn't want them thinking I was a hysterical sister. I wanted them to see this for what it was: fraud. By mid-morning, I got the reply. Miss Glenn, we've received your formal submission. Our legal team is opening an internal audit and placing a temporary freeze on the trust account. Any attempted access during this period will be flagged and recorded. I exhaled and then added one line of my own before logging out. Please notify me immediately if anyone attempts to override the freeze. I want full documentation. It felt like putting a deadbolt on something I hadn't realized was already wide open. I didn't tell anyone in my family. Not yet. Not even 3 days passed before the next hit landed. I was on a call with a client when my phone lit up with a text from Clara, a colleague I'd worked with on a research project last year. Clara, just a heads up, Serena's posting something weird about you. I don't want to overstep, but it feels pointed. I muted my work call and opened Instagram. Serena's latest post was a carousel from her wedding dress fitting, a long caption wrapped in perfect lighting and emotional fluff. Family means everything, but sometimes greed changes people. And it's heartbreaking when the person who should be clapping for you is the one tearing you down. Some women just don't know how to celebrate love without making it about themselves. I didn't need a name to know she was talking about me. Beneath it, dozens of comments chimed in. Jealousy is ugly. I know sisters like that always need the spotlight. You deserve better, Serena. You're slandering me publicly, Serena, but I'll make you regret it, I thought, my fingers trembling as I saved the post. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just screenshot everything. Caption, comments, the timestamp, the hashtags. Then I opened my private journal and typed one line. They think I'll back down to protect the illusion, but I don't owe them that. And that's when I knew I wasn't just fighting for a piece of paper with my name on it anymore. I was fighting an open letter, not to post yet until I had every piece. It wasn't vindictive. It was clear, careful, surgical. It started with, my name is Roberta Glenn, and I was never supposed to talk. In the meantime, I spoke with Miss Bell again. I forwarded the Instagram post. Her voice was sharper this time. This isn't just inheritance fraud anymore. This is reputational damage, public defamation. You don't just have a trust to protect. Now, Roberta, you have a reputation and we'll protect both. She promised to draft a cease and desist. I didn't ask her to wait. That weekend, a calm settled over me. Not peace, but clarity. I didn't go out. I didn't answer calls. I didn't return the email from my aunt asking, have you considered just letting this go for the sake of family harmony? Harmony? That word tasted like bleach. Now, I cooked, cleaned, organized the drawer where I'd kept the napkin, still folded, still misspelled. Then I received the call. Late Saturday night, just before midnight, it was Ellen, my cousin on my father's side. She'd always stayed neutral, never liked the drama, never chosen sides. Her voice was quiet, almost apologetic. Bert, listen, I'm not supposed to say anything, but Serena and your mom, they're talking about doing something bigger, something public. I sat upright. Like what? A pause. Then they're drafting a letter to the family, maybe to the neighborhood board about you, saying you're unstable, that you're trying to sabotage the wedding, that you've had episodes. My breath stalled. Ellen's voice softened. I don't believe it. I know you, but you need to see what they're planning next before it's too late. You're trying to destroy me, Serena, but I'll fight back, I thought, my heart racing with determination. I didn't respond right away because deep down I had always wondered if they'd stoop that low. But now I knew whatever piece I thought I could protect, they'd just shattered it themselves. I met Ellen the next morning, and what she showed me made my hands shake. We chose the corner booth at Harold's Diner, the one with the chipped formica table and the smell of burned coffee that never really fades. The place was nearly empty except for a delivery driver reading a newspaper and an old couple arguing gently over toast. I don't know why I expected some dramatic setting. I guess I was bracing for something heavy. Ellen slid into the booth across from me without a smile. She didn't order coffee, just pulled out her phone, handed it to me, and said, "You need to scroll carefully." The screen lit up to a closed Facebook group, Barrett and Serena's Most of the names in the comments were Barrett's relatives, some with matching last names I recognized from the RSVP list. The tone was giddy, boastful, triumphant. But then I read Serena's post. Roberta is being difficult again, but it's fine. Once the wedding is formalized, we'll get access. The trust is practically family property at this point. And a comment from one of Barrett's aunts. You're doing the right thing. That money was always meant to keep the family strong. Then one from Alice, my mother. We'll just handle this like we handled the inheritance issue years ago. I couldn't breathe for a second. The phone felt hot in my hands. I stared at her words until they blurred. I heard my own voice in my head trying to rationalize. Maybe it means something else, but it didn't. You've been stealing from me for years, Mom, and I'm done letting you, I thought, my fury ignited. I looked up at Ellen. She was watching me carefully. You never knew, did you? She asked. Knew what? Ellen exhaled. There was an original property deed, your grandfather's land, out by Pine Ridge. It was supposed to be held until all his grandkids came of age, but after his funeral, it disappeared off the table. My mom said it was reorganized privately by your parents. That broke something in me. I didn't wait. I left Harold's without finishing my coffee. The air outside was brisk and wet. Autumn in Savannah always smelled like wet pine needles and cold regret. I got in my car and drove straight to the county records office. The clerk at the front desk barely looked up as I requested property records under my grandfather's name. She handed me a folder after 30 minutes. Inside, the truth unfolded in plain black and white. 4 years after my grandfather's death, one grand falsel of land, his original farmstead, had been transferred. The listed transfer was from Elias G. Glenn to S. G. Len Serena. No mention of me, no notation of multiple beneficiaries, no family trust registered, nothing. The same property, I realized with nauseating clarity, was now the one listed on the engagement gala's RSVP card as the family estate. They'd stolen from me once, and now they were doing it again, only bolder. You took my legacy, Serena, but I'm taking it back, I thought, my defense against it. I drove aimlessly for a while, the file folder tossed beside me on the passenger seat. The wind picked up as I reached the trailhead near Cliff Point. It was where Grandpa used to hike with me when I was little, back when I thought I was seen. There's a ledge halfway down the trail, flat and quiet, with a view that rolls out toward the sound. I sat there and closed my eyes. I remembered Grandpa's voice one fall afternoon decades ago. People who want to erase you from the story always forget you remember how it really went. And I had remembered every half smile, every rewritten memory, every napkin with the wrong name. I opened my phone, looked at the photo of the embroidered Roberta, scrolled through the Facebook screenshots, then the scanned trust document, the forged signature, and I whispered, "It's time." Back in town, I didn't go home. I went straight to my lawyer. Miss Bell didn't blink when I said what I wanted. "Prepare the letter," I said. "I want them served before the wedding." She nodded slowly. "We'll begin immediate proceedings. You have every right to protect your legal and personal interest." I got home after dark. The air had a chill that crept through my sleeves and settled in my bones. Sat at my kitchen table, I opened my laptop, created a folder, named it The Record. Then I opened a blank document and began drafting the open letter. Not as a social media post, not as some emotional outburst, as a declaration. I told the truth clearly, quietly, with attached documents, screenshots, timestamps, and legal citations. There was no emotion in the words, just precision. I scheduled it not to go live yet, but ready because they wanted a story they could control, a soft, focused fairy tale where I was the villain, petty, bitter, withholding. But I wasn't writing that version. As I shut the laptop, my phone vibrated. A call. It was Ellen. She didn't even say hello. Her voice was low, urgent. "You need to see what they're planning next before it's too late." My heart beat once harder. "What are you talking about?" "They're talking about filing a complaint against you, saying you're mentally unfit to manage the trust. They're already speaking to someone." And just like that, whatever peace I thought I could protect, they just shattered it themselves. The letter went out at exactly 9:00 a.m., 10 hours before the first song was meant to play at the wedding. 10 hours before they expected to raise a glass to the fantasy they'd been constructing for years, one built on my silence. I didn't dress up for war. I wore an old sweater and jeans, sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, watching the scheduled emails send itself. No grand ceremony, no fireworks, just the quiet ping of digital accountability beginning its course. Miss Bell's office sent the cease and desist notices by courier and email. Serena, Barrett, Michael, Alice, and one to the venue's legal counsel, alerting them to potential misuse of property obtained through fraudulent inheritance. By 11:30 a.m., the venue manager called my lawyer directly, not me. They'd received a documentation and were suspending use of the property pending verification of lawful ownership. Their language was cold, professional, and decisive. Around that time, my scheduled open letter went live. I'd prepared it for weeks, but it still took me a full 10 minutes to press publish. Once it was live, I didn't sit and watch. I got up, rinsed a few breakfast dishes, swept a corner of the living room, but my phone began vibrating every 5 or 6 minutes. First, a message from someone I hadn't spoken to since high school. "I'd just read your post. I always knew you were the real one in that family." Then, a comment notification from a stranger on the neighborhood board. Was that the engagement brunch? Something felt off. Glad someone finally said it. The letter was calm. Fact, not feeling. A summary of events. Screenshots of the trust's forged documentation, a copy of the land deed transfer, a photo of the napkin with my name misspelled. And, at the very end, one line. "This is not revenge. This is the truth, and I won't be rewritten." By 12:30 p.m., local Facebook moms were sharing it. One tagged someone I vaguely remembered from middle school. "Is this the same Serena you were telling me about? The one with the matching Range Rover?" The internet, once stood, moves fast. By early afternoon, the caterer pulled out. Apparently, a few other vendors had been contacted too. Word spread that the family estate was under investigation. Then, the photographer removed due to misaligned values. I didn't ask anyone to cancel. I didn't need to. The news outlet from Savannah picked it up at 3 p.m. Bride's sister reveals shocking trust dispute ahead of local wedding. The comments ranged from sympathetic to savage. "Y'all thought you could bury her. Turns out she was the one holding the shovel. So that's why no one saw the dad speak at the party. He knew. Imagine stealing your sister's name and her money." Meanwhile, I didn't answer my phone, not once. At 7:03 p.m., 3 minutes after the wedding was supposed to begin, my phone buzzed with a single message from my mother. "You've made your point. I hope you're happy." I'm free, Mom, and you can't take that away," I thought. My heart steady. No apology, no shock, just blame wrapped in bitterness. I didn't reply. At 8:30 p.m., I made tea. Not to celebrate, not even to reflect, just to breathe. The sun had already dipped below the hills, casting a soft gold along the porch of my grandfather's old cabin. I sat with the cup warming my hands, the same napkin beside me, this time cleaned and pressed. I'd folded it into a perfect square, like I had so many times when I was younger, trying to make something neat out of what always felt messy. There was no music, no sound of toasts, no laughter echoing across the venue, only a gentle breeze and the weight of my own heartbeat slowing down. I didn't cry. Instead, I just whispered, "They finally said my name," and not because they wanted to, but because I refused to let them erase it. The wedding never happened. No vows, no music, no father walking anyone down an aisle. But the silence afterward, that said more than any toast ever could. In the 3 weeks that followed, I didn't post anything else. I didn't gloat. I didn't reply. I simply lived, watered my plants, finished a client's research paper, let the dust settle around me while others scrambled to sweep their own footprints off the floor. Funny how the absence of noise can make people rethink where they stood. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years messaged me through Facebook. I didn't know everything. I'm sorry. One even admitted she had believed Serena's side until the receipts hit the neighborhood group like a lightning bolt, but the ones who mattered most stayed silent. My mother sent a text on the 12th day. "We need time. You went too far." Too far? I just exposed your lies, Mom, I thought, my resolve unshaken. "No, how are you? No ownership, just deflection. Michael, nothing, not even a call. Ellen stopped by with a small basket of scones from her garden club. We sat on the porch, legs curled under us like we were 12 again. She didn't say much at first, just handed me a cup of warm cider and let the air breathe between us. Then finally, you didn't burn it down. They lit the match. You just refused to pretend it wasn't fire. Do me, Ellen, and that's enough, I said, my voice soft with gratitude. I let out a quiet laugh, not from amusement, but from recognition. She got it. Maybe she always had. A few days later, I met Miss Bell at her office downtown. It was a short meeting. The bank's audit confirmed the attempted access, and the trust was now locked tighter than Fort Knox, access limited to my name alone. The venue had refunded the deposit, noting contractual irregularities, and Serena's name was stricken from their client history. I thanked Miss Bell, but before I left, she said, "You did this with dignity. That's rare." I smiled, but it didn't quite reach my eyes, because dignity didn't mean it hadn't hurt. That weekend, I drove out to my grandfather's cabin in the woods. I hadn't been there since the first leaves began turning. Now they carpeted the path in gold and rust, crunching beneath my boots as I walked up the familiar steps. The porch hadn't changed, still creaked in the same spot, still held the indent in the wood where he used to rest his coffee cup. I sat in the chair beside it and reached into my coat pocket. The napkin was there, cleaned, ironed, folded perfectly. I placed it beneath the flat river stone he used as a paperweight, the same stone I used to pretend was magical when I was 6. And I whispered, "This was never about the money. It was about memory, about being seen, by someone who never needed convincing that I mattered. I'm seen now, Grandpa, and I won't let them erase me again," I said, my voice steady with triumph. The wind picked up, catching the edge of the napkin just slightly before settling it flat again. On the drive home, I didn't cry. I just stared at the road stretching in front of me. Quiet, long, unbothered by detours. Back in town, I opened my laptop and began outlining a new research paper. This one for a national foundation, a big one, the kind that funds lasting work, not just flashy ideas. Ellen looked over my shoulder and raised a brow. "You're really going for that?" I nodded. "For once, I'm going to use what's mine to build something no one can erase." She didn't answer, just reached out and gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze. Later that evening, I sat down by the fireplace, the glow soft across the walls, and recorded something for my own piece, a voice note I might never publish but needed to say aloud. Maybe your name was misspelled too. Maybe they sat you by the kitchen or rolled their eyes when you spoke. Maybe you've been told you're too sensitive, too quiet, too hard to connect with. But maybe, just maybe, you don't need them to spell it right because you already know who you are, and that's the name they'll remember, even if it's the one they tried to bury. I didn't need the spotlight. I just needed them to stop pretending I didn't exist.